Did I go to college? Yes, I did. I went to college and university, and that resulted in me getting a degree in horticulture. So it's a Bachelor's of Science in Horticulture and honours degree in landscape architecture, which I got in the University of Gloucestershire in the UK. Yes, we provide more than one service. We're predominantly focused on landscape construction, but we also do landscape maintenance and what else? Well, it's really landscape construction 80–90% and then landscape maintenance as well. Why did I choose to go into this line of work? I chose to go into this line of work because it's always been in me to do it since I was like 10 years old, pottering around my mother's garden. I always had an interest in plants. And then from there, one of my earliest jobs was working for a landscape provider called the Patio Centre in Cabinteely. And that got me into all the materials and everything. It's also where I met my current business partner today, Sean. I worked in the Patio Centre with Sean. And then from there, I studied horticulture. And then during my time studying horticulture, I ended up on a TV show on RTE for design with a world-renowned garden designer called Gavin. And I was runner-up on that TV show. It was like a TV reality show. But that kind of inspired me to be fully committed to the design aspect of it. So then from there, I decided, right, I want to be a landscape architect. And then I studied landscape architecture. And then I worked as a landscape architect for like 3 years. And then I took a complete break from it for like 8 years. And then I lived abroad for a while, and then I came back to Ireland, kind of rekindled my friendship with Sean, who's my business partner. And from there, we decided to go into business together. How did I get the funding to set up the business? That's a great question. Okay, so during my time as a landscape architect and while I was getting my degree, I simultaneously set up what they would call today a side hustle, right? So I set up this content website for landscape architecture, and I created this this website that saw out the best landscape architecture projects in the world. I'd contact the offices. I'd say, look, we want to feature you on our website. Can you send us over all the photos of your projects so we can highlight it in an article format? And anyway, that was the point of that website. But I ran that for about 7 years, and I was able to then eventually sell it. So I sold it for a lump sum and an undisclosed fee. But that allowed me to fund the beginning of SAS Landscapes, because there was enough there for me to take out like 10 to 15,000 to fund this and buy our tools, just have cash flow to just pay people, subcontractors and stuff like that, and just even pay wages, really. So that's how I funded it. The idea to set up SAS Landscapes, again, going back to me and Sean, we formed quite a formidable partnership. So SAS is, whichever way you look at it, Scott and Sean, or Sean and Scott, it doesn't really make a difference. But it's just the two of us. I bring a lot to the table that Sean doesn't. Sean brings a tremendous amount to the table that I don't. So it's a good balanced partnership. And I really believe our spirit is in every project we do. It really shines through in our work. Yeah, absolutely. The business has been running for about 4 years now. I would say it took about 3 to 3.5 years for us to be a profitable business, meaning everyone's paid, all the creditors are paid, all the subcontractors are paid. We're earning a living wage, and on top of that, then on top of course paying all our taxes and everything, we're growing in capital now. So we actually have a business that's growing every week in terms of profit. So those first 3 years were incredibly challenging. Money was always tight. We didn't know when the next job was coming in. We didn't know if we could actually sustain a wage from it. Maybe it was just going to be a hobby for us, something we do on the side. Could we support our families? You know, there's a lot of stress there. As well as that, going through personal issues on my side and Sean's side, that all comes into play as well. So yeah, setting up your own business is tremendously stressful because, well, unlike a job where you're kind of pigeonholed into what you do for your employer and you can kind of focus on what you're doing in any given day, and the rest of the stuff is just kind of noise. In a business, you're responsible for everything. So your head is in 10 different places at once, and you always have to kind of try and bring in the focus and shift gears to what you need to be doing, which is completely different than the job. The job, you know exactly what you need to do most of the time, depending on what job you have, of course. But generally, like, you know, like a football player just needs to focus on playing really good football. You just need to focus on getting fans to the stadium or the marketing or the sales or any of that stuff or anything legal. He just needs to focus on his game. And that's what an employer does, just focus on why they hired you. But setting up a business, you have to know everything from A to Z. How do we promote it? Well, we use social media a lot, but also the branding is really important. That's one of the reasons why we insist on wearing branded uniforms, and the fan is branded as well. And you know, as we grow our arsenal of fans, we'll brand all that. Word of mouth is continuously something that we lean on, and I'd probably say that social media is probably the biggest thing we do to bring in new business and create brand awareness. That's a great question because every day is different, really. What skills do I use? I'd say the number one skill that I have to use is planning. All your profit and lack of profit is usually lost or gained in your planning process. If you plan well, you'll most likely save a lot of time, save a lot of money, and make a lot of money. If you don't plan well, the opposite is also true. So I'd say being a good planner, being a good strategist is essential in terms of skills. But when you're running a company, your skills are so varied. So a good question I learned to ask from one of my mentors called Joe Doyle. He has this concept about which hat are you wearing, right? This is a question you need to ask yourself. So whatever stage you are in your business, whatever challenges you're facing, to ask yourself the question, which hat do I need to wear now? So if there's no business coming in, right, I need to wear my sales hat. If the lads are really busy and they need someone on site pushing things and making sure that everything's getting done, I need to put on my labouring hat. You know, if the client has some sort of issue, I need to put on my negotiator hat, my mediation hat. So a question I ask every day is, okay, which hat do I need to wear today? Which employee do I need to be of my own company today? That's another fantastic question. Certainly at the entry level, this is something I see a lot. I don't really know where it comes from, but certainly there's people who are capable of labour intensive work, and there's just people that just are not. right? And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's how they're raised. I don't know if it's, their own independent attitude. I don't know if it's in their DNA. But so it's one of those things you either have or you don't have. And when somebody asks me for a job, I'm looking for that in them straight away. Are they actually capable? Do they have it inside them to do outdoor work and do labour-intensive work? Because I've been through so many lads that think they can do it, and you can almost tell just by looking at them. It's strange. You don't really know what it is, but you can tell by almost looking at somebody if they're capable of doing physical labour. And then if you can't tell by looking at them, you'll know within 5 minutes of working with them. And it really is something you're either born with or you're not. I don't think it's something that can be trained or developed. It's just there. It's not.
Business.
What skills would you say to run your own business? I think it's not about skills. I'd say it's about attitude. I'd say it's about just having this relentless drive in you never to give up. Because there's always reasons to give up running your own business. And if you have this attitude that overcomes all of that, you'll get whatever skills you need to get. Like if you need to get better at something, you'll go on YouTube and you'll learn how to do it, or whatever. So as long as you're one skill, actually being resourceful, I would say. A lot of people lack that ability. When they're put in a situation, they think to themselves, oh, well, this is just the way it is, so there's nothing to do. But a resourceful person will go, what are my options here? And they'll assess it, and they'll choose the best option. So it is all about attitude, but if there's one skill I could hone in on, it's being resourceful. Competition certainly can affect your business. I tend not to focus on competition, because I think if you focus on competition and landscaping, it's really a race to the bottom. You're trying to undercut your competitors, and instead of focusing on things like added value or quality, you're just trying to be the quickest and the cheapest. So the only person I'm in competition with is whoever I am today. I want to be better than the Scott I am today, tomorrow. So I tend to think creatively about business and not from a competitive mindset. I want to position myself as a leader of the industry, or position SAS Landscapes as a leader within the industry. And I know that's a very ambitious thing to say for such a small company. There's 4 of us, and we're minnows in this ocean of landscaping, where there's some really big players. But we have the attitude that we can be somebody in this industry. So to sum up your question, or sum up the answer, I do my best not to come at this from a competitive mindset, and I come at it from a creative mindset. I'm always thinking in terms of growth and being better than what I was yesterday. No, I say mostly I don't enjoy being my own boss, and that doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm not doing this for the enjoyment. I'm doing this because it gives me purpose. And I heard a great thing the other day, and I don't know who said it. I wish I knew who I'm quoting, but basically there's a time in every person's life when they've got to choose between pursuing a life of happiness and pursuing a life of meaning. And for me, that is undoubtedly a life of meaning. Of course, enjoyment and happiness pops its head in every now and again, and that's a beautiful thing. I accept it. It's wonderful, but it's not what drives me at all. I'm driven as a man on a mission, and I pursue that way of thinking. That's why I get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. That's why I do a morning schedule. That's why I do an evening schedule. That's why I read the books I read. It's not for enjoyment. It's because it's who I am. These are fantastic questions. That's a beautiful question. Basically, is there stress? Yeah, there's massive stress in running a business, especially when it's a company and you've got staff that are expecting to be paid week in, week out. Because, you know, if you're like a sole trader and it's basically just you know, whoever casually works with you from time to time, if there's a gap in work, you don't really have to be that concerned about it, because you know you can just take a break and it's not the end of the world. But if you can't pay your staff, it completely disrupts the entire system of your company. So there's tremendous stress, especially in the landscape construction. The money is relatively big as well. You're dealing with people's life savings in some cases. So there's a lot of pressure on you to get the job done right. And you know, I'm going to tell you a story now. For the first 3 years of this business, the stress was much worse than it is today, because I was constantly telling myself that I wasn't good enough. Like, why are things not working out? This must be a sign. Maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe it's time to change my careers. Like, what am I doing wrong? I give it my best. I try so hard and things just don't work out for me. Not that the customers weren't satisfied, but in terms of running a profitable business, it just wasn't working out. And in these 3 years, as you know, I had triplets, right? So I had these beautiful babies, Alexander, Logan, Elizabeth, and that became quite a handful. So I'm running a business, I have these triplets at home, and if I was stressed before, I was majorly stressed now. But anyway, one thing that happened with them was they gravitated towards this movie, cartoon called Shrek. And this was like a godsend, it was like a gift. They just gravitated towards this movie, Shrek. And they didn't sit down and watch the whole movie, but they would give us half an hour a piece. And it would always be on in the background. And there's 4 Shreks for anyone who doesn't know. And we must have watched these movies about 500 times, because they were like an oasis in the desert. They gave us like half an hour of calm in chaos. And my favourite Shrek, Shrek number 4, there's a scene at the start of that movie where the king and the queen, Fiona's mum and dad, of Princess Fiona, they go to Rumpelstiltskin to make a deal, because they're so like at a loss because of the curse that's put on Fiona, you know. So at day one way, at night another way, and basically she goes from human to being an ogre every night. And Rumpelstiltskin is this guy who makes deals with people. He makes magical contracts, and Rumpelstiltskin is with them making this deal. And the deal they make with Rumpelstiltskin is for all their problems to go away. So that's the deal. They wanted all their problems to go away, meaning Fiona turning into an ogre every night was their biggest problem. So as soon as they signed the contract, all their problems go away, but actually they disappear. And I thought, I watched this probably 100 times, and when I watched it this time, and they signed a contract, all their problems disappeared and they disappeared, right? And I thought, that's a bit profound actually. And it made me realize that you actually are your problems. And what gives your life meaning is how you resolve and deal with your problems. It's actually what gives you value in the world, your ability to deal with problems. And that made a switch in my head, and I realized all these things I'm thinking are problems that I think are my life going wrong. That's actually the work. That's actually what I need to be doing. That's what I need to be embracing. As opposed to resisting the problems and looking at problems thinking I'm doing something wrong and this is causing me so much stress because I'm not good enough, I start recognizing the problem for what it actually was. The problem is what gives me value. my ability to deal with the problem is what makes me great and what makes people want my services. Essentially, I'm in the business of solving people's problems. So it was that one little scene in Shrek that completely changed my attitude to the problems that were causing me stress in work. And now when I have these, problems in work, I'm like, great, let me show the world how valuable I am by dealing with this problem. What advice would I give people setting up their own business? I'd say don't set up your own business. And the reason I'd say that is because if me telling you not to set up your own business puts you off setting up your own business, then you shouldn't be in business. Right? So I would say don't set up your own business, but I need you to have the attitude to say, whatever, pal, I'm going to do it anyway. Because that's the attitude that's going to help you set up your own business. If it just takes one nobody, nothing guy like me to say, don't do it, and then you're like, okay, I won't do it. Definitely, you don't have the heart or the mindset to be in business. So it's kind of a trick advice. Yeah, if you asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have given you a completely different answer. Now my answer is not so much to expand, but to maximize profits and then to diversify and invest those profits into other streams of revenue. So that's a completely different answer than I would have gave you when I started the business. When I started the business, I had a 7-year plan, and we were going to have vans and trucks all over the road and have an army of 50 to 100 people. That was the old mindset, and now this new kind of creative mindset, this mindset that's been wounded a couple of times, thinks completely different. I think more in terms of efficiency more so than expansion, because being big for the sake of being big is ridiculous. At the end of the day, are you more prosperous? You can be big with more stress and less prosperity. So that's definitely shifted for me.
Well, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Keava. It was a pleasure answering all your questions.
Thank you.
And good luck to you in your class. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye-bye.